They say the soul enters the body with the first breath, and some say it leaves with the last. But across ancient Africa, breath was far more than the bookends of life. It was the substance of life itself, the sacred thread that weaves between the body, the mind, and the spirit. The ancestors didn't study breath in laboratories. They felt it in the silence of the early morning, heard it in the rustle of leaves when the wind whispered wisdom, watched it rise and fall like the chest of the earth herself. Breath wasn't just oxygen, it was essence. They named it differently across regions: Ankh in Kemet, Ori in Yoruba philosophy, Umuzi among Nguni. Each language capturing the truth that air carries energy, and energy is the bridge to the divine. And they treated it with reverence. Each inhale was sacred, each exhale a release. Posture wasn't about appearance, it was about alignment with the cosmos. Stillness wasn't weakness, it was the gateway to higher realms. Breathing wasn't just function, it was a form of prayer. So how did we lose it? Centuries of colonization erased many of these truths. The sacred sciences were dismissed as superstition. The seers and healers silenced. The rhythm of the breath replaced with the rhythm of survival. We were taught to hustle, to hold our breath, to push through pain, to ignore the inner voice that whispers in the quiet. And yet, some part of us remembers. That moment when you sigh after holding tension, and something inside softens. That pause when you're alone in nature, and suddenly feel connected to everything. That breath before a difficult decision, when clarity finally arrives. These aren't coincidences. They're echoes. Echoes of ancient wisdom buried in our bones. Echoes of grandmothers who hummed lullabies in tune with the breath of the earth. Echoes of warriors who controlled their breathing before facing fear. Echoes of spiritual guides who healed the sick, not with pills, but with presence, breath, and stillness. In this journey, we're not just exploring history, we're remembering a truth you've always known. That healing doesn't always come from outside. That the body is a temple and the breath is its chant. That stillness isn't empty, it's full of guidance, if you're willing to listen. Over the next chapters, we'll uncover how African civilizations used breath to access altered states and divine communication, why posture was key to spiritual energy flow, how rhythmic breathing was used in rituals, childbirth, warrior training, and even communal grief, and how you, right now, can begin to reconnect to this ancient power. You don't need incense, you don't need a temple, you don't need to leave your life behind, you just need to remember how to breathe. This isn't fiction. It's not myth, it's memory, carried in the breath of a people who knew the power within. You are not just a body, you are not just a mind, you are breath, you are spirit, you are sacred. And today, we begin the return. In ancient African philosophy, breath wasn't a function, it was identity. To breathe was to exist, but to understand breath, to master it, was to rise beyond the boundaries of flesh and connect to the divine rhythm that pulses through all life. In Kemet, what we now call ancient Egypt, the symbol for life was Ankh. Often mistranslated as merely life, the Ankh held a deeper truth. It represented the breath of life, gifted from the gods to humanity. Pharaohs weren't shown receiving weapons or gold, they were shown receiving breath. From the mouths of deities, the Ankh was extended, breath as sacred inheritance, not just for survival, but for sovereignty of spirit. Inside Kemetic temples, priests and initiates practiced controlled breathing in harmony with cosmic order. These rituals align not just the body, but the spirit with Maat, the principle of balance and truth. Every breath was a recalibration of the self to the universe. They believed the Ka, the life force, moved with the breath, and when the breath flowed, so did wisdom. But this divine relationship with breath extended far beyond the Nile. Among the Yoruba people of West Africa, breath is intimately woven into the Ori, the seat of spiritual consciousness and destiny. To breathe deeply was to activate the Ori, the divine aspect within. Every soul, they taught, chooses its path before birth, but it is through breath, steady, aware, intentional, that we stay aligned with that sacred path. Breath awakens purpose. Breath reminds us who we are. In Yoruba healing practices, priests guide followers through Im-centered rituals. Imi means breath. It also means spirit. When illness strikes, it is often seen as a disturbance in the harmony of the Im, and healing begins not with external medicine, but with restoring the breath. To the Zulu of Southern Africa, Breath was the echo of the ancestors. When calling upon one's lineage, it is not enough to speak, one must breathe them in. Chants rise and fall with the cadence of the lungs, invoking a presence felt not in the ears, but in the chest. Their sacred breathwork was not written, but lived, in rhythm, in dance, in silence. And this pattern repeats itself across the continent. In Swahili, the word pumzi means both breath and air. Among the Akan of Ghana, okra, the soul, is believed to leave the body with the final exhale. The Dogon of Mali studied breath not as air, but as vibration, mirroring the cycles of planets, stars, and life itself. Everywhere, breath was not mere biology. It was metaphysics. It was memory. It was the means by which humans communed with the universe. And it wasn't just for the spiritual elite. Breath wisdom was democratic, known by midwives and farmers, warriors and weavers. Before planting, breath was offered to the earth. Before a hunt, breath steadied the mind. Before childbirth, rhythmic inhalations helped call the soul of the newborn into this world. Before battle, warriors stood still, breathing as one, anchoring courage in their core. In every case, breath was a form of alignment, not just with the self, but with ancestors, with the land, with the divine. This wasn't myth. This was science of the soul, just not written in the language of microscopes or equations. And yet, as time moved on and colonization spread, these sacred technologies were dismissed. The silence of stillness was called laziness. The wisdom of breath was branded superstition. Entire civilizations that revered breath were redefined as primitive. But the knowledge never died. It was carried in lullabies, encoded in drum beats, passed from grandmother to grandchild through ritual, not textbooks. Today, we stand at a crossroads, burnt out, disconnected, breathless. Not because we lack air, but because we lack awareness. We scroll, we hustle, we grind. And in the process, we forget that peace isn't something we chase, it's something we return to inside the breath. By reclaiming the breath wisdom of Africa, we're not returning to the past, we're restoring wholeness, we're realigning with something that has always lived in our lungs. So right now, take one breath, but not the usual kind. Inhale like the Nile flows, smooth, full, patient. Exhale like you're letting go of lifetimes. Feel that? That is not just oxygen, that is you, whole, ancient, and alive. This is the breath of life, and it has been waiting for you to remember. In ancient African teachings, the body was never just skin and bones. It was a temple, a sacred vessel designed to channel divine energy. And just as a temple must be aligned with the stars, so too must the human frame be aligned with the breath, the earth, and the spirit. Posture, then, was not about elegance, it was about energy flow. The elders believed that the spine was the staff of the soul, a sacred pillar where ancestral memory and spiritual current intertwined. To stand tall, with shoulders open and heart forward, was to declare to the universe, I am here, I am aligned, I am ready to receive. In Kemet, priests and priestesses practiced stillness not as a form of inactivity, but as spiritual architecture. Every seated posture was geometrically intentional. The angles of the knees, the alignment of the back, the tilt of the chin, all formed energetic gateways designed to tune the body into resonance with higher frequencies. They sat like pyramids, unmoving, silent, vast, because stillness was power. And stillness, for them, was anything but empty. In stillness you listen, not with your ears, but with your soul. In stillness, the chaos within dissolves and the truth begins to rise. In stillness, the noise of the world fades and the whisper of your ancestors comes forward. Across the continent, similar practices appeared. Among the Dogon, posture was used to mirror star alignments. Among the Bantu, stillness was used in trance work, not to lose consciousness, but to deepen it. In the Ethiopian highlands, Christian mystics sat in prayer for hours, their breath slow, their bodies upright, becoming conduits between heaven and earth. The body was never seen as an obstacle to the spirit. It was a conductor, and how you held it determined what you could receive. Imagine your posture like a riverbed. If the path is crooked, the water struggles to flow. But when the channel is clear, energy moves freely. The same was believed of human energy, or as some called it, the vital force. A slumped spine was not just poor form, it was spiritual blockage. A collapsed chest signaled a closed heart. A tense jaw suggested unspoken truth. And so, the path to power began with the body. They taught young warriors to breathe into their feet. They taught mothers to ground their pelvis like tree roots. They taught seers to align their heads with the sky, to receive visions with clarity. And the secret ingredient to all of it? Stillness. In a world where movement is praised, where noise equals relevance, the ancients knew that silence was the true gateway. Not the silence of absence, but the silence of presence, where nothing distracts and everything is felt. Try it now. Sit upright, feet planted or crossed, spine long. Close your eyes, breathe slowly, and listen. This is what they knew, that in the quiet the energy returns, that when the body is still the soul stirs, that when posture and breath align, healing begins. This is not just meditation, it is remembrance. Remembrance that your body was designed to carry light, that your stillness is not passive, it is activating. You are not just flesh and function, you are geometry, you are rhythm, you are a temple, and in your stillness the divine takes form. Across ancient Africa, healing was not something done to the body, it was something restored from within. And at the core of this restoration was the breath, the sacred current that reconnected spirit, emotion, and body into harmony. Breath was medicine, and it came in many forms. Among the Dagara people of Burkina Faso, healing rituals involved rhythmic breath and sound. Healers would guide individuals through cycles of inhale and exhale timed with the beat of drums. This wasn't just for relaxation, it was a diagnostic. The way someone breathed revealed blockages in the spirit. A shallow breath meant fear. A broken rhythm meant grief. The cure began with breath, to find the wound, not just mask the pain. In Ethiopia's ancient Orthodox tradition, monks practiced something called breath prayer. Short, sacred phrases whispered with the rhythm of the lungs. Lord, have mercy. Inhale. Christ, give peace. Exhale. Over hours, these whispers transformed into a deep, meditative trance, where breath, spirit, and divine presence fused as one. In Kemet, breath was used alongside intonation, vibrational chanting, especially using sacred sounds like ma'at or ra, was believed to resonate with specific organs and spiritual centers. Each tone was breath-powered. Each breath, guided with intent, became a carrier of healing frequencies. Even in daily life, Africans knew how to breathe with purpose. Grief was never suppressed. It was exhaled. Through ululation, a high-pitched, breathy cry performed in communal mourning. This wasn't just cultural expression, it was catharsis. The release of breath was the release of pain. During childbirth, midwives instructed mothers not just in pushing, but in breathing. Deep, slow, rhythmic inhalations gave the mother control. Exhalations became offerings to usher life into the world. The breath was not just biological, it was ceremonial. And in initiation rites, whether for warriors, hunters, or spiritual apprentices, breath was the anchor. Fasted, fatigued, or challenged, the initiate was always brought back to their breath. It was the thread that held them steady when every external identity was stripped away. Let's not forget the role of breath and rhythm. Breathing in sync with drums is an ancient African technique to enter altered states. In the Bwiti tradition of Gabon, rhythmic breath and percussion guided participants into vision quests, where healing visions and ancestral messages were received. The breath matched the tempo of the drum, and when it did, consciousness shifted. Modern science might call this trance, or breath-induced parasympathetic activation. But to the elders, it was simply returning home. Letting the body become still, letting the breath take over, and allowing the spirit to rise. In some Congolese healing circles, breath was even shared. Practitioners would breathe near the patient, not mouth to mouth, but in energetic unison, as if to say, "Okay, I carry your burden with my breath." This communal breathing dissolved isolation. It reminded the wounded they were never alone. So how do we reclaim these techniques today? You don't need to chant in ancient languages or find a shaman in the rainforest. You only need to begin. Sit in silence. Notice your breath. Make it rhythmic. 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out. Add intention. On the inhale, invite healing. On the exhale, release pain. Speak with your breath, even if your mouth makes no sound. Sing if you must, sigh if you must, but breathe like it matters, because it does. Every sacred ritual began with a breath. Every healing journey depended on it. And the greatest healers weren't those who did the most, but those who listened the deepest. And listening always began with breath. The wisdom of ancient breath was never truly lost. It was buried beneath rubble, beneath trauma, beneath centuries of silencing. But now, like a seed pushing through cracked earth, this wisdom is rising again. In yoga studios, wellness retreats, online classes, and spiritual circles around the world. And what's most powerful? Much of this awakening is being led by those who carry the ancestral codes in their DNA. The descendants of those who once breathed in rhythm with the earth. Across the African diaspora, a reclamation is underway. Black healers, breathwork coaches, and spiritual teachers are reviving techniques their ancestors practiced long before colonizers arrived. They are merging the ancient with the modern, not to copy the past, but to remember it in new ways. And for many, this rediscovery begins in pain, after burnout, after grief, after trauma leaves the body tight, the chest heavy, the night sleepless. In those moments, breath becomes the first medicine we reach for. Not a pill, not a product, but something innate. Something no one can sell because it's already yours. From Brooklyn to Lagos, from Johannesburg to London, breath circles are forming. People are gathering in silence, closing their eyes and breathing together, letting generations of fear, suppression, and silence move through the lungs and out. Because healing is not always loud. Sometimes it's just an exhale. This movement is also backed by science. Today's researchers speak of the vagus nerve, of parasympathetic response, of trauma release through breath. They measure what our ancestors felt. That deep breathing slows the heart rate. That exhalation calms the mind. That breath connects body and soul in a way no medicine ever could. But the ancestors didn't need machines to know this. They listened. They trusted the wisdom of the body. And now, so are we. Social media has become a surprising ally in this rediscovery. Through platforms like YouTube and TikTok, young Black creators are sharing breathwork practices, telling ancestral stories, guiding others into stillness. They are breaking the myth that spirituality must look foreign, sound Sanskrit, or come from someone else's lineage. They're saying, this too is ours. For example, breathwork facilitator Jasmine Marie, founder of Black Girls Breathing, has helped thousands of women of color process anxiety and reclaim presence through breath. She doesn't teach from borrowed traditions, she teaches from home. From the heartbeat of Black experience, shaped by joy and survival. Others are integrating African drumming with conscious breathing, reviving old rituals with modern rhythm. Some lead ancestral breathing meditations that honor lineages forgotten but never gone. These practices are not about trend, they are about truth, about returning to what we were never meant to forget. And the impact is real. People report not just relaxation, but remembrance. As if with each inhale something long buried awakens, with each exhale something heavy is released. With each breath, they return to a center that colonization tried to erase. This is not just healing, this is justice. Spiritual justice, cultural justice, personal justice. In reclaiming the breath, we reclaim ourselves. We say no to shame, we say no to erasure. We say yes to rhythm, yes to silence, yes to the life force that has always lived inside us, quietly, patiently, waiting. This is the new wave. But it's not new at all. It's a remembering, a rising, a breathing back to life of something ancient, powerful, and beautifully ours. There is a kind of silence that isn't empty, it isn't lonely, it isn't passive, it is sacred. In ancient African traditions, silence wasn't the absence of sound, it was the presence of power. A space where the voice of the divine could be heard. A state where truth could emerge without force. A return, not to nothingness, but to everything that matters. This was the kind of silence that elders knew well. In the early hours of the morning, before the village stirred, they sat, not to plan, not to speak, but to be, to sit with the wind, with the breath, with the invisible rhythms of life. They understood something we often forget, that the deepest wisdom does not shout, it whispers, and to hear it, you must be still. Stillness wasn't weakness, it was preparation. Warriors entered silence before war. Healers entered silence before ritual. Grievers entered silence before releasing their tears. In silence, the breath slows. In silence, the heart reveals its pain. In silence, spirit comes forward, not as a spectacle, but as a quiet knowing that sits in your bones. Have you ever noticed how clarity doesn't come when you're rushing? But in that moment, when you're alone, still, quiet, suddenly you know what to do? That is not coincidence, that is alignment. And ancient Africans cultivated this deeply. Some traditions practiced sacred sitting, stillness in nature facing the sunrise, the breath timed with the beat of the earth. Others taught that if you couldn't hear your ancestors, it wasn't because they weren't speaking, it was because the world was too loud. So they turned down the world, they turned up the breath, and they waited, not for hours, sometimes for days, until the insight came, until the spirit spoke, until the energy shifted, and when it did, they moved, not from impulse, but from inner command. Today, our world is the opposite, loud, fast, constant. We scroll for answers, we chase clarity, we numb ourselves with noise. But the soul is always whispering. We just forget how to listen. That's why returning to inner silence is radical. Because in silence, we remember that we are more than our to-do lists, more than our pain, more than our past. We are breath, we are presence. We are connected to something infinite, not by force, but by flow. Try it. Sit alone. Turn off the distractions. Close your eyes. Breathe. Don't try to fix anything. Don't try to accomplish. Just notice. Notice the rhythm of your inhale. Notice the sound of your exhale. Notice what comes up. Fear, grief, joy, stillness. Let it come. Let it pass. Stay with your breath. This is where healing begins. Not in effort, but in surrender. Not in answers, but in awareness. The return to inner silence is not a step backward. It is a step deeper into who you truly are, beneath the noise. It is where the ancestors still wait. It is where your power still lives, and it is yours always, in the breath. You came here looking for knowledge. What you found was remembrance. Through the ancient winds of Africa, we've journeyed into the sacredness of breath, not as air, but as spirit. We've walked through temples where breath was life. We've sat with elders who breathed in rhythm with the stars. We've listened to chants, felt the stillness, and reclaimed what was never meant to be forgotten. You now know, breath is power. Breath is healing. Breath is presence. In every tradition we uncovered, one message was clear. You are not just breathing, you are being breathed by something infinite, something wise, something ancient that knows your purpose, your pain, and your path. And now you hold the key. With every inhale, you invite life. With every exhale, you release what no longer serves you. With every pause in between, you rest in your true self, eternal, untouchable, whole. So when the world gets loud again, return. When anxiety grips your chest, return. When you forget your worth, return. Not to a place, but to a breath, to a posture, to a stillness. This is the legacy of your ancestors. This is the wisdom in your lungs. This is the revolution that no one can take away. So breathe like it matters, because it does. And if this journey touched something in you, a memory, a knowing, a tear, then share it. Let others remember too. Like, subscribe, speak this truth forward. You are not just alive. You are the breath.